Those eyes, those watchful amber eyes that missed nothing. They tracked every movement, cataloged every micro-expression, assessed every potential threat. Consider the way Mufasa's gaze follows his brother during their first encounter in the film, not with surprise or innocent disappointment, but with the calculated assessment of someone confirming what they already know. What if the greatest deception in The Lion King wasn't Scar's betrayal, but Mufasa's apparent ignorance of it? The traditional reading of Disney's masterpiece presents Mufasa as the noble but somewhat naive king, blindsided by his brother's treachery and meeting his downfall through trust. It's a comforting narrative that reinforces our belief in the purity of the hero, but this interpretation crumbles under scrutiny. Look closer at Mufasa, the strategist who maintains perfect control over a vast kingdom, who understands the delicate balance of the circle of life, who demonstrates exceptional awareness of everything happening in his realm. Would this lion, this king, truly miss the seething resentment and plotting happening within his own family? The impossible contradiction lies at the heart of Mufasa's character. The evidence stares us in the face from the very beginning. When Scar fails to attend Simba's presentation, Mufasa doesn't react with surprise but with resignation. He doesn't send someone to find his brother. He goes personally, understanding the delicacy and danger of the confrontation. And when Scar sarcastically questions Mufasa's power, Mufasa's response is telling, "Is that a challenge?" This isn't the question of someone caught off guard. It's the warning of someone who has been waiting for the inevitable confrontation, perhaps for years. The eyes of a king see everything, especially threats to his legacy. To understand this theory fully, we must reconsider what we know about Mufasa. The film portrays him as the embodiment of righteousness and wisdom. He rules with compassion but firmness. The other animals revere him. Even the morning light seems to bow to his presence, illuminating his majestic form as he surveys his kingdom from Pride Rock. But beneath this golden exterior lies a mind of exceptional strategic capability. Consider how efficiently Mufasa handles the hyena incursion when Simba and Nala venture into the elephant graveyard. His timing is impeccable, his show of force perfectly calibrated. This isn't luck or coincidence, it's the action of a leader who maintains constant vigilance. This changes everything. Mufasa wasn't just teaching Simba about being a good king, he was preparing him for Scar. Look at the lessons Mufasa imparts to his son. He doesn't simply teach Simba about the beauty of the kingdom or the joy of ruling. Instead, he emphasizes responsibility, awareness of threats, and understanding of the darker elements that must be balanced. The shadowy place beyond the Pride Lands isn't just a geographical boundary, it's a metaphor for the darkness that exists within the kingdom itself, personified by Scar. Every interaction between the brothers carries the weight of unspoken history. The new Mufasa film gives us glimpses of their complex past, but even in the original movie, the tension speaks volumes. Their body language, Mufasa's towering presence versus Scar's slinking movements, tells the story of a power dynamic established long ago. When analyzing their confrontation scenes frame by frame, the truth becomes evident. Mufasa never turns his back completely on Scar. He maintains positioning that allows him to respond to any sudden movement. His muscles remain tensed even when his voice is calm. These aren't the behaviors of someone oblivious to danger. They're the instinctive responses of a warrior who perceives a threat. In the animal kingdom, awareness is survival. Lion behavior in the wild offers fascinating parallels. Male lions are constantly alert to challenges from within and outside their pride. They recognize the signs of potential usurpers and respond with preventative displays of dominance. Mufasa's interactions with Scar follow this pattern precisely. The confrontations aren't emotional outbursts, but calculated demonstrations of power. Consider also Zazu's role. The Majordomo isn't just a comic relief character, he's Mufasa's intelligence network. Checking in with the morning report isn't just administrative routine, it's a security briefing. And notice how often Zazu specifically mentions Scar's whereabouts or activities. This isn't coincidence, it's surveillance. The pieces begin to align into a disturbing picture. Mufasa was aware of the danger Scar presented all along. Every interaction, every decision was made with this knowledge weighing on his mind. And yet, he allowed Scar to remain in the Pride Lands, to stay close to his family, to continue his machinations. The true tragedy isn't that Mufasa didn't see betrayal coming, it's that he saw it and still couldn't prevent it. But this realization only leads to more profound questions. If Mufasa knew about Scar's treacherous nature and his plots, why didn't he act more decisively? Why maintain the pretense of ignorance? Why allow Scar such proximity to Simba? The traditional reading of Mufasa's character offers no satisfying answer. But if we reconsider Mufasa not just as a noble king, but as a complex strategist playing a longer game, new possibilities emerge. Possibilities that reframe the entire narrative of the Lion King. What if Mufasa's seeming blindness to Scar's treachery wasn't blindness at all, but part of a greater plan? As Mufasa stands at the edge of the gorge, looking down at his trapped son, does he truly fail to sense the danger lurking behind him? Or does he make a choice, a terrible, necessary choice, knowing exactly what might follow? The answer may change everything we thought we knew about the Lion King, and to find it, we must look deeper into the evidence hidden in plain sight throughout the film, evidence that points to a far more complex psychological game between the brothers than we ever realized. What was Mufasa's true endgame? And if he saw Scar's betrayal coming, why didn't he stop it? The savannah at dawn, golden light washing over the grasslands as a powerful figure surveys his domain. This iconic image of Mufasa isn't just visually stunning, it's our first clue to his true nature. A king who rises before his subjects, who positions himself to observe everything. This isn't vanity, it's vigilance. The forgotten warning, Mufasa's awareness system was more sophisticated than we realized. Throughout the film, Mufasa demonstrates an uncanny ability to know exactly what's happening in his kingdom. When Simba and Nala venture into the elephant graveyard, Mufasa arrives precisely when needed, not a moment too early or too late. Coincidence? Hardly. Zazu's role takes on new significance in this light. His morning report isn't just administrative, it's intelligence gathering. Notice how Zazu specifically tracks Scar's movements. He's not at Pride Rock. I haven't seen him all morning. This isn't casual conversation, it's surveillance reporting. The film offers subtle but consistent evidence that Mufasa maintained awareness of Scar's activities at all times. Consider how Mufasa responds when Scar misses Simba's presentation ceremony. He doesn't ask, "Where is Scar?" He states Scar with resignation, then goes directly to confront him. Mufasa knew exactly where to find his brother. Lions in the wild never turn their backs on potential threats, especially from within their own pride. Wildlife biologists have documented how male lions navigate complex social dynamics. They're hyper-aware of potential challenges from other males, particularly relatives. They engage in subtle dominance displays, maintain strategic positioning, and never fully relax around potential usurpers. Mufasa's behavior mirrors these natural instincts perfectly. He consistently positions himself between Scar and Simba. He maintains physical dominance in every interaction. He never shows vulnerability around his brother. The new Mufasa film enriches our understanding of this dynamic. We see that Mufasa's leadership wasn't instinctive but learned through harsh experiences. His awareness wasn't paranoia, it was hard-earned wisdom about the nature of power and those who covet it. The strategic king, Mufasa's political acumen is dramatically underplayed in the traditional reading. Ruling a kingdom as vast and diverse as the Pride Lands requires exceptional leadership skills. Mufasa maintains peace among predators and prey, balances resource distribution, and preserves traditions while adapting to challenges. This isn't the profile of a ruler who would miss obvious threats to his reign. Let's examine the strategic mind behind Mufasa's actions. His everything the light touches lesson to Simba isn't just fatherly bonding, it's a systematic threat assessment, identifying potential dangers and establishing boundaries. His warning about the shadowy place isn't just about physical danger, it's preparing Simba to recognize threats that lurk in plain sight. His lessons about the circle of life aren't just ecological, they're political, establishing the philosophical justification for his rule while preparing Simba to understand that even kings face limitations. What if Mufasa allowed Simba to venture toward the elephant graveyard as a controlled test? One of the most puzzling moments in the film is when Mufasa allows Simba to go off with Nala, accompanied only by Zazu. For a protective father and vigilant king, this seems oddly careless, unless it was deliberate. Consider the timing. Mufasa has just finished teaching Simba about kingship and boundaries. Scar has recently interacted with Simba, subtly directing him toward the elephant graveyard. What if Mufasa was aware of this manipulation and decided to use it as a teaching opportunity? By allowing Simba to face danger in a controlled way, with Zazu to report and Mufasa himself standing by, he creates a powerful lesson about heeding warnings and recognizing manipulation. Notice how quickly Mufasa appears when needed, suggesting he was monitoring the situation all along. This changes everything. Mufasa's apparent absence during key moments wasn't neglect, it was calculated observation. Throughout the film, Mufasa seems to appear and disappear at critical junctures. This isn't plot convenience, it's the action of a leader who understands when to be visible and when to watch from afar. He's giving Simba room to grow while maintaining protective oversight. The most telling evidence comes from Mufasa's unnervingly calm reaction when confronting Scar at the gorge. In that moment of crisis, with his son in danger, Mufasa shows no surprise at finding Scar there. There's no, "What are you doing here?" or "Thank goodness you found me." Instead, there's an immediate focus on the task at hand, as if Scar's presence is exactly what Mufasa expected. The haunting question: if Mufasa could read Scar so clearly, why continue the charade? Here lies the psychological complexity at the heart of this theory. Mufasa maintains the pretense of normal brotherly relations despite clearly understanding Scar's true nature. He allows Scar to remain in the Pride Lands near his family, despite the obvious danger. This apparent contradiction makes sense only if Mufasa was playing a deeper game, one with stakes beyond his own safety. The traditional interpretation offers no satisfying explanation for why such a wise king would blindly trust a visibly resentful brother. But if we reconsider Mufasa as a strategic thinker implementing a longer-term plan, new possibilities emerge. The most powerful pieces on the chessboard often appear to be vulnerable, until the endgame reveals their true purpose. Mufasa's treatment of Scar follows the logic of containment rather than confrontation. By keeping Scar close, Mufasa could monitor him. By maintaining the pretense of familial bonds, he could observe Scar's plots developing. And perhaps most importantly, by allowing Scar some proximity to power, he prevented him from becoming an external threat who might gather forces beyond Mufasa's sight. The parallels to historical leadership strategies are striking. Throughout history, wise rulers have kept potential usurpers in positions where they can be watched rather than exiling them to become rallying points for opposition. The pattern no one noticed. Mufasa coincidentally appears whenever Scar is near Simba. Review the film carefully and a pattern emerges. Every time Scar interacts with Simba, Mufasa is either present, arrives shortly after, or seems to know exactly what transpired. This isn't storytelling convenience, it's evidence of Mufasa's constant vigilance regarding his brother. Even more telling is how Mufasa teaches Simba to recognize manipulation. The lessons about responsibility, about the burden of kingship, about understanding one's enemies, these aren't just general wisdom. They're specifically calibrated to help Simba recognize and resist Scar's influence. The evidence builds to an inescapable conclusion. Mufasa saw clearly who Scar was and what he intended, yet still the tragedy unfolds. Mufasa still faces his brother at the gorge. He still places himself in a vulnerable position. He still leaves his son unprotected during the stampede's aftermath. If Mufasa was so aware, what was his bigger plan? This question leads us to an even more profound possibility, one that transforms our understanding of Mufasa's character and the entire narrative of the Lion King. What if Mufasa's actions weren't just about protecting his kingdom in the present, but securing its future through a strategy so bold, so sacrificial, that it required him to face Scar knowing exactly what might happen? To understand this possibility, we must look beyond Mufasa as merely a king and consider him as a master strategist playing a game with moves planned far in advance. A game where sometimes the king must be sacrificed to achieve the ultimate victory. What if everything, from Mufasa's teachings to Simba, to his handling of Scar, to his actions at the gorge, was part of a calculated long game with stakes higher than his own survival? The true measure of a king isn't just how he rules in times of peace, but the plans he puts in place for when disaster strikes. Throughout history, the greatest leaders weren't just reactive, they were visionaries who prepared for contingencies beyond their own reign. The lessons were insurance. Mufasa's teachings went far beyond basic kingship. Re-examine the lessons Mufasa imparts to Simba. They take on new significance when viewed through this lens. He doesn't just teach Simba about being king, he prepares him for hardship, for challenges to his legitimacy, for navigating a hostile world without guidance. The most telling moment comes when Mufasa takes Simba to the starlit savannah. The great kings of the past looked down on us from those stars, he tells his son. So whenever you feel alone, just remember that those kings will always be there to guide you. And so will I. This isn't just comforting philosophy, it's preparation. Mufasa is deliberately creating a psychological framework that will allow Simba to find strength and guidance even in his absence. He's installing mental pathways that will activate precisely when needed most. The architectural precision of Mufasa's teachings reveals a mind planning for contingencies. Consider how Mufasa structures his lessons. First, he establishes Simba's connection to the land and his future responsibilities, creating a sense of purpose that will endure beyond any personal tragedy. Next, he demonstrates protection against threats, the hyena incident, showing Simba both the nature of danger and the necessity of facing it. Then he delivers the crucial lesson about the stars, creating a symbolic connection that transcends physical presence. Finally, in their last interaction, he establishes the concept of learning from mistakes rather than running from them, the exact wisdom Simba will need to return and face Scar. This isn't random parenting. It's systematic preparation for a specific future scenario, one where Simba must find his way back to his rightful place without Mufasa's physical guidance. The Silent Sentinel. Rafiki wasn't just the shaman, he was Mufasa's contingency plan. One of the most overlooked aspects of The Lion King is Rafiki's role in Simba's return. Rafiki doesn't stumble upon Simba by accident. He actively seeks him out, apparently guided by Mufasa's spirit. But what if this plan was set in motion long before Mufasa's demise? Notice how Rafiki is the only character besides the royal family who can enter Pride Rock freely. He has unique access and trust. He maintains distance from day-to-day politics yet remains connected to the kingdom's spiritual center. In strategic terms, he's the perfect sleeper agent, respected, independent, and above suspicion. Mufasa's close relationship with Rafiki takes on new significance in this light. Their interactions suggest a deep understanding and shared purpose. What if part of that purpose was establishing Rafiki as the fail-safe, the one who would recognize and guide Simba when the time came? The pattern of preparation extends to the entire Pride Lands ecosystem. Mufasa doesn't just prepare Simba and Rafiki. He cultivates relationships throughout the kingdom that will serve his son in the future. The respect he shows to every creature, the alliances he builds, the balance he maintains. These aren't just good governance. They're investments in a network that will eventually help restore Simba to his rightful place. Even Mufasa's handling of the hyenas shows strategic foresight. By keeping them in the elephant graveyard rather than driving them away completely, he maintains them as a known quantity rather than an unpredictable external threat. He contains them where they can be monitored, just as he does with Scar. This changes everything. Mufasa may have sacrificed himself deliberately as part of a greater strategy. This is where our theory reaches its most provocative point. What if Mufasa's actions at the gorge weren't just noble but calculated? What if, seeing no other way to secure the kingdom's future, he made the ultimate sacrifice? The evidence is subtle but compelling. Mufasa enters the gorge alone, despite knowing Scar is present. A king concerned only with immediate survival would have brought support. He immediately sends Zazu for help rather than keeping him as witness or assistance, removing the one who might intervene in what follows. After rescuing Simba, he places him safely on a ledge before attempting his own escape, ensuring his heir's survival regardless of what happens next. When facing Scar at the cliff edge, his expression shows recognition but not surprise, as if confirming a scenario he had already anticipated. This isn't to suggest Mufasa wanted to leave his son, rather that he had prepared for the possibility as part of a contingency that would ultimately secure Simba's development into a greater king than he himself could be. Lions sometimes make the ultimate sacrifice to preserve their legacy. In the natural world, male lions will risk death to protect their offspring, knowing that their genetic legacy depends on the cub's survival. Mufasa's actions follow this primordial pattern, but with a sophisticated understanding of what Simba truly needs to develop into a worthy king. The evidence suggests Mufasa understood a difficult truth. Simba might need to experience loss, exile, and return to become the king the Pride Lands truly needed. A king who understood both responsibility and mercy, who had experienced both privilege and hardship, who could unite rather than merely rule. Mufasa's genius was recognizing that Scar's victory had to be temporary for the kingdom to ultimately thrive. If we accept this interpretation, Mufasa's apparent blindness to Scar's treachery transforms into something far more profound, a willingness to incorporate even his brother's darkness into a greater plan. Not because he approved of Scar's methods, but because he understood that true balance in the circle of life requires experiencing both light and shadow. This explains why Mufasa, who clearly understood Scar's nature, never banished or eliminated him. It wasn't naive trust or misplaced brotherly love. It was recognition that Scar had a role to play in the larger story of the Pride Lands, however tragic. The most devastating question remains, was Mufasa's demise part of his own design? We must be clear. This theory doesn't suggest Mufasa wanted to die or that he didn't fight to survive. Rather, it proposes that he had prepared for the possibility, had created systems that would activate in his absence, and had perhaps recognized that his own removal from the board might be necessary for the ultimate victory. Think of it as the chess master who sacrifices his queen, not because he wants to lose that piece, but because he sees that without that sacrifice, the game itself is lost. Mufasa's strategic genius was recognizing that sometimes the king must fall for the kingdom to ultimately prosper. But this brings us to the most troubling aspect of our theory. If Mufasa was such a strategic thinker, why not simply remove Scar from the equation entirely? Why maintain the pretense of familial bonds with someone he knew meant harm to him and his son? To answer this question, we must delve deeper into Mufasa's character, not just as a king and strategist, but as a brother caught in an impossible moral dilemma. The most powerful moments in any story often come not from what a character does, but from what they choose not to do. And here we face the central question that challenges our entire theory. If Mufasa knew about Scar's treachery, why didn't he simply remove his brother from the equation? A king with Mufasa's power could have easily banished Scar from the Pride Lands. He could have exposed his brother's plots. He could have taken decisive action to neutralize the threat. Yet he didn't. This apparent contradiction demands explanation. The answer lies in understanding the impossible choice Mufasa faced, caught between his duties as king and his bond as brother. Between pragmatic leadership and his own moral code. Between what was expedient and what was right. The burden no one sees. Mufasa carried the weight of both crown and family. Unlike most rulers, Mufasa's greatest threat came from within his own bloodline. The traditional response throughout history would be decisive elimination of the threat, as we see in countless human dynasties where brothers dispatched each other to secure power. But Mufasa represents a different kind of leadership, one governed by principles beyond mere survival. The circle of life philosophy isn't just ecological wisdom. It's a moral framework that recognizes the value of all lives within the system, even those that seem destructive. Mufasa's restraint toward Scar represents his deepest values in action. Not weakness, but conviction. Not blindness, but a profound understanding that true leadership means finding solutions beyond elimination. Everything you see exists together in a delicate balance. Mufasa's own words reveal his dilemma. This iconic line takes on new meaning when applied to Scar. In the balance of the Pride Lands, even Scar had his place. Removing him would create its own imbalance, its own disruption to the order Mufasa worked so hard to maintain. More pragmatically, banishing Scar might have created an even greater threat, an exiled prince gathering forces beyond the borders, nursing grievances, and potentially returning with outside allies. By keeping Scar close, Mufasa could at least monitor and contain his brother's darkness. The hopes none of us recognized. Mufasa may have been waiting for Scar's redemption. Let's be honest. How many of us have family members we know are troubled, but whom we can't give up on? Now imagine that person is your only brother, the last connection to your shared past. The evidence suggests Mufasa never completely abandoned hope for Scar. His approaches to his brother, firm but not cruel, establishing boundaries but still allowing presence, mirror how one handles a family member with destructive tendencies. There's discipline but also maintained connection. In the new Mufasa film, we see deeper context for this relationship. Their history wasn't always defined by animosity. There were moments of brotherhood, of shared purpose. Mufasa, more than anyone, would remember the lion Scar once was, and perhaps hope for his return. This changes everything. What if Scar wasn't just a villain to be defeated, but a necessary counterbalance in Mufasa's plan? The Lion King 2 introduces the concept that darkness and light, outsiders and Pridelanders, must ultimately find unity rather than destruction. What if Mufasa understood this truth long before, that Scar's perspective, however distorted, contained elements necessary for the Prideland's future? Consider how Simba's eventual leadership style incorporates lessons from both Mufasa and Scar. From his father he learns responsibility and selflessness. But from witnessing Scar's reign, he learns about the dangers of absolutism, the importance of listening to diverse voices, and the need for compassion even toward former enemies. Without experiencing both models of leadership, Mufasa's and Scar's Simba might never have developed the balanced approach that ultimately allows for reconciliation in the sequel. The foresight no leader admits. Sometimes the system must break to truly evolve. History's wisest leaders have sometimes recognized that the systems they built would eventually need transformation that might be impossible under their continued reign. What if Mufasa recognized that the Pride Lands needed to experience both his leadership and its absence to find a stronger future balance? This isn't to suggest Mufasa wanted the suffering Scar's rule would bring, but rather that he understood sometimes systems must experience failure to discover the path to greater resilience. Look at how the Pride Lands recover after Scar's defeat, not just returning to what they were under Mufasa, but evolving into something new. The unity at the end of The Lion King is deeper precisely because it was forged through adversity. What if Mufasa saw multiple possible futures? The wisest leaders don't just plan for one outcome, but prepare for multiple possibilities. What if Mufasa's approach to Scar wasn't a single strategy, but a branching decision tree with preparations for different scenarios? Perhaps he hoped for Scar's redemption, but prepared for his treachery. Perhaps he sought to protect Simba directly, but created backup systems in case he couldn't. Perhaps he worked to maintain his reign, but accepted that its end might be necessary for a greater purpose. This multi-dimensional chess game explains why Mufasa's actions sometimes seem contradictory. He wasn't playing for a single outcome, but preparing for many possible futures, ensuring the best possible result regardless of which path unfolded. The political reality few acknowledge: removing Scar could have destroyed the kingdom too. Even if Mufasa wanted to take direct action against Scar, the political consequences might have been devastating. Scar had his supporters among the Pride, particularly those who felt marginalized under Mufasa's reign. Forcibly removing him might have triggered exactly the kind of division that would eventually happen anyway, but without any of Mufasa's preparations in place. By allowing events to unfold as they did, Mufasa ensured that when division came, there would also be a path to restoration through Simba. The unspoken burden of kingship. Sometimes there are no good choices. The true tragedy of Mufasa's situation may be that he faced a problem with no perfect solution. Every potential action carried devastating consequences. In such situations, the wisest course isn't always immediate action, but careful preparation for recovery after inevitable damage. Mufasa's genius, then, wasn't in preventing Scar's betrayal, which may have been truly unavoidable, but in creating the conditions for healing and restoration after that betrayal had run its course. This perspective transforms our understanding of Mufasa's seeming inaction from weakness to profound wisdom. The recognition that some fires must burn before new growth can emerge. The family bond theory: brotherhood transcends kingship. Beneath the politics and strategy lies something simpler yet more profound. Mufasa loved his brother. Despite everything, despite seeing Scar's darkness, there remained a connection that Mufasa couldn't sever. We see this in how he confronts Scar throughout the film, with firmness but without cruelty, with boundaries but without hatred. His approach consistently offers Scar the chance to be better, to rejoin the family in truth rather than just appearance. This compassion might seem naive from a purely strategic standpoint, but what if it was actually Mufasa's greatest strength? What if his refusal to succumb to hatred and vengeance, even when justified, was precisely what made him the leader the Pride Lands needed? But there's something even bigger we've all missed. The true complexity of Mufasa's character, and the true brilliance of his long game, goes beyond even what we've explored so far. Because the greatest leaders don't just play to win in their lifetime, they play for victories that will unfold long after they're gone. To understand the full scope of Mufasa's vision, we must look beyond his relationship with Scar to his ultimate goal, not just preserving the Pride Lands, but transforming them for a future he knew he might not live to see. What if everything, his approach to Scar, his teachings to Simba, even his apparent downfall, was in service to a vision so profound it would reshape the entire Pride Lands for generations to come? A king stands on the edge of a cliff, paws gripping rock, muscles straining against gravity. Below, certain demise. Behind, a brother whose betrayal he has long anticipated. The moment freezes in time, Mufasa looking into Scar's eyes, recognition flowing between them, not just of Scar's treachery, but of something deeper. A moment of understanding that transcends the immediate danger. What if this wasn't just Mufasa's end, but the culmination of his greatest plan? Throughout this analysis, we've reframed Mufasa as a strategic genius who saw Scar's betrayal coming. But now we must confront the most profound possibility. What if Mufasa's actions weren't primarily about Scar at all, but about Simba? The evidence points to a staggering conclusion. Mufasa's ultimate strategy wasn't about preserving his own reign, but about creating the conditions for Simba to become a greater king than he himself could ever be. The ultimate test: hardship as the forger of extraordinary leaders. Consider the Simba who would have emerged had Mufasa's reign continued peacefully. He would have been brave, certainly, responsible probably. But would he have developed the profound understanding of loss, redemption, and balance that defines his character by the film's end? Without experiencing exile, would Simba have truly understood the perspectives of those outside the Pride Lands? Without living among Timon and Pumbaa, would he have gained appreciation for different philosophies? Without losing everything, would he have learned the true value of what he had? The Simba who returns to challenge Scar is fundamentally different from the cub who fled. Not just older, but wiser in ways that peaceful succession could never have achieved. Real African leadership traditions provide a striking parallel to Simba's journey. Across numerous African cultures, leadership preparation often involves periods of trial, isolation, and return. Young leaders-to-be are sent away from their communities, facing hardship that transforms them before they return to lead. The Maasai tradition of the warrior journey sends young men into the wilderness to survive and return as leaders. The ancient Kemetic Egyptian tradition required future pharaohs to undergo symbolic death and rebirth. Many West African societies maintain rites of passage where future chiefs must experience isolation before assuming authority. These traditions recognize a fundamental truth. Great leadership cannot be inherited or simply taught. It must be forged through personal transformation. Looking at the Pride Lands' history reveals a cycle Mufasa would have recognized. The health of the Pride Lands seems to follow a cyclical pattern, periods of prosperity followed by challenge, leading to renewal and growth. Mufasa, as its steward, would have been acutely aware of this rhythm. What if he recognized that his continued reign, however benevolent, was reaching a point of stagnation? What if he saw that the next phase of the kingdom's evolution required disruption followed by renewal under a leader tempered by both prosperity and hardship? The greater wisdom, sometimes the hardest path, is the necessary one. Parents face a universal dilemma, whether to protect their children from all hardship or allow them to experience challenges that will help them grow. The wisest parents understand that some lessons can only come through difficulty. Mufasa's approach to Simba follows this deeper parental wisdom. We see it in how he responds after rescuing Simba from the hyenas, not with pure protection, but with tough teaching that prepares Simba for the harsh realities of leadership. This changes everything. Mufasa knew Simba needed to fail to truly succeed. The most startling evidence for this theory comes from examining what Simba gains through his exile that he could never have learned directly from Mufasa. True empathy for outsiders and those who live differently, through Timon and Pumbaa. Understanding of how leadership affects the most vulnerable, by seeing the Pride Lands under Scar. The ability to forgive and incorporate former enemies, as he does with the lionesses who supported Scar. The capacity to find his own path rather than simply following tradition, balancing Mufasa's teachings with his own experiences. The strength that comes only from falling, suffering, and rising again, the core of his character arc. None of these essential qualities could have developed had Simba simply grown up under Mufasa's continued protection and guidance. They required the journey, the fall, and return that only Mufasa's absence could create. Mufasa's teachings suddenly revealed their true purpose, not just guidance but preparation for absence. Revisit every lesson Mufasa imparts to Simba with this new understanding. Each takes on deeper significance. The everything the light touches speech isn't just about the kingdom's boundaries, but about establishing a connection to the land that will endure even in exile. The Starfield lesson isn't just spiritual comfort but preparation for guidance when physical presence is impossible. The Kings of the Past teaching isn't just tradition but psychological preparation for maintaining connection beyond death. Even Mufasa's stern lesson after the hyena incident, "I'm only brave when I have to be," becomes preparation for the courage Simba will need to return and face his past. The sacrifice theory, Mufasa chose the kingdom's future over his own life. This doesn't mean Mufasa wanted to leave his son or that he didn't fight to survive. Rather, it suggests that when faced with circumstances where his death became likely, he had already prepared for this outcome as part of a greater design. His last words to Simba, "Remember who you are," take on new significance. Not just as comfort, but as activation of the psychological framework he had been building all along. The trigger that would eventually bring Simba back to fulfill his destiny. African proverbs speak to this deeper wisdom. Smooth seas do not make skillful sailors. In many African traditions, there's recognition that leadership requires experiencing both abundance and scarcity, both acceptance and rejection, both victory and defeat. A leader who knows only prosperity cannot truly understand or serve all their people. Mufasa, embodying this wisdom, may have recognized that Simba needed to experience both sides of existence to become the king the Pride Lands truly needed for its next era. The parallels between Simba's journey and Campbell's hero's journey are striking. The call to adventure, the fall from grace, the period in the wilderness, the return with new wisdom. This archetypal pattern appears in leadership stories across cultures precisely because it represents the necessary transformation of true leaders. The full analysis of Simba's growth compared to Mufasa's teachings reveals something profound. Simba doesn't just return to continue Mufasa's legacy, he transcends it. His leadership style incorporates his father's strength and wisdom, but adds dimensions that Mufasa's approach lacked. Where Mufasa maintained clear boundaries between the Pride Lands and outside territories, Simba creates integration and exchange. Where Mufasa ruled through tradition and established hierarchy, Simba incorporates diverse perspectives in new ways. Where Mufasa maintained order through strength, Simba builds harmony through understanding and reconciliation. This isn't to diminish Mufasa's greatness, but to recognize that his greatest achievement may have been creating the conditions for a son who could surpass him. The haunting possibility: did Mufasa know his demise would ultimately save the Pride Lands? The most complex aspect of this theory isn't that Mufasa anticipated Scar's betrayal, but that he recognized how his own removal, however painful, might be necessary for the kingdom's evolution. Not because he failed as king, but because true balance in the circle of life sometimes requires disruption before renewal. Not because he wanted to leave Simba, but because he understood that some lessons can only be learned through absence. This perspective transforms our understanding of Mufasa's character from merely noble to profoundly wise, a leader who could see beyond his own reign to what the kingdom truly needed in the generations to come. What does this tell us about the true meaning of leadership in the Lion King universe? The Lion King has always been more than entertainment. It's a meditation on leadership, responsibility, and the natural order. If we accept this new understanding of Mufasa, the film's message deepens considerably. True leadership isn't just about maintaining prosperity during one's reign, but about preparing for challenges that will come after. It isn't just about protecting those in your care, but about preparing them to face difficulties you cannot shield them from. It isn't just about being strong, but about recognizing when your own strength might limit the growth of those who follow. Perhaps most profoundly, it suggests that the greatest leaders aren't those who cling to power and presence, but those who understand when their absence might serve a greater purpose than their continued rule. Mufasa's legacy isn't just the golden era of his reign, but the transformed kingdom that emerges after darkness, a kingdom led by a son who learned from both his father's wisdom and the painful void his absence created. In this light, Mufasa's apparent blindness to Scar's treachery transforms into something far more profound. Not a failure of awareness, but the ultimate act of foresight. Not a moment of weakness, but his greatest demonstration of strength. The true tragedy and triumph of the Lion King isn't that Mufasa didn't see betrayal coming, it's that he saw much further beyond it, to a future where even that betrayal would serve the greater balance of the circle of life. What king could make such a sacrifice? What father could show such trust in his son's eventual triumph? What leader could see so far beyond his own time? Only one whose eyes truly missed nothing, especially the greater purpose behind his own place in the endless circle of life.